What's up, everybody? Welcome to my beginner's draft guide. For those of you who have been watching my Bucks franchise and have watched other videos that I've put out for just tips and tricks to understand the game better, some of you have been saying that, why do you say some of the things that you do when you're drafting or scouting, and what are you looking for in certain positions? And I realize that sometimes, as a longtime player of the game, and as a lot of creators are, we sort of forget that there are a lot of people that maybe are just getting into the game as a whole. Maybe they know football, but they don't understand drafting. They don't understand the game. Maybe they don't even understand the game of football. They might be learning it because they just found out that they liked it. So that sort of prompted me to want to start this series where I just do more very basic understandings of the game, going back to the drawing board and just starting from scratch. Because I know I take for granted the amount of stuff that I know about this game, and I've had quite a few comments, not just related to drafting, but to other things as well, saying, I don't understand how to do this. I don't understand how to make this work or how to get this result. So hopefully this video and some of the others that I'm going to be coming up with will help you guys in getting a little bit more acclimated with the game and understanding things more, so that way you can grow your enjoyment and overall excitement about playing the game. So this video is going to be all about drafting. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a new franchise file. I'm not going to do anything else outside of just the draft stuff. So scouting, setting up the scouts, going throughout the season, going through the motions, and then going through a draft and just explaining what I'm looking for in players and what stands out to me for certain positions and what I look for in terms of quarterbacks, wide receivers, defensive linemen. There's different things to look for, and I just want to help you guys understand all of that. So hopefully this will help you out. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're just going to go and start a new franchise file here. I'm sure most of you know how to do this, but I'm just going to walk you through anyway, just in case. I still prefer offline. I've noticed that online has been really laggy and sort of glitchy for me. I don't know if it's been that way for you guys, but I just prefer using offline because I don't have to rely on the servers. And yes, things take a little bit longer, like simming, but it just seems to be a little bit safer, especially after what happened last year for franchise players. So we're gonna go ahead and we're just gonna do offline active roster. And the first thing I always do is I go to league settings. Most of this stuff is not gonna be anything you have to change. This will automatically be set to manual, but always just double check to make sure that you don't have anything set to, for instance, to simple, where everything is automatically done for you, because then you won't be able to, scout your own players or choose who gets scouted and what scouts go where. So make sure that that is turned to manual. One of the other settings is prospect storylines. This will also automatically be turned on. This just means that in the news tab, which I'll show you when we get to the franchise file, you'll see some tweets regarding upcoming prospects. They are difficult to spot, and they don't seem to be as prevalent this year as they have been in Madden's past, but they are still there. So you just got to read through those tweets that they send out every week when you advance to see if there's anything about a certain prospect, and it might give you, and some of them can really tell you whether or not they're worth drafting. Like I remember in one of my franchise files, in my Bucks franchise, we actually had a player that it said had horrible injury history. And when he was drafted, he only had a 47 injury. It was really, really low. And it looked the same as 40-50% of the rest of the people that had the same injury grade. But his was 20-30 points lower in his attribute than the rest of them because of that tweet. Luckily, I didn't draft him, and I didn't want to draft him. But imagine if I would have just assumed that it's the same as everybody else, because I sort of know that what the ratings can usually be around, and just draft him anyway, saying we'll deal with it. Then he's a 40-something injury. So prospect storylines can be a big help and an indicator as to whether or not a player is worth it, or if a player is somebody that maybe you should just take off your board altogether. So I always prefer to have them on. The other part that will affect your drafts is the dev trait management here. This is what the default is set at, is 50 X Factors, 75 superstars, and 400 star dev players. Now, most of the time with my franchises, I'm always turning star dev all the way up to 50. I'll usually leave these two alone because this is going to dictate how many potential hidden development players are going to be in your draft class. If you have too many X Factors or too many superstars or too many stars already in your draft file, the game is going to not allow them to have any more than what is already available, or it'll just throw everything off. So choose wisely on how you want this to be set up, or you can just leave it at default. You're still going to get, hidden development players. It's just whether or not you're going to get a lot of them or if you're going to get very few. Now, this isn't necessarily a part of the draft process, but this is honestly where your draft process should start, because you're going to start scouting players as soon as week 1 hits. You're going to set your scouts, and then you're going to start, looking through it and deciding who you want to draft, who might be good, who might not be. And because Madden is set to where it limits how many players you can really get a lot of scouting percentage done for, you have to sort of have an idea of what you think you'll be looking for before the offseason. I preach that preseason is important, at least if you don't understand your team fully yet, or if you're not sure how players are going to play. Here, looking at my Vikings, just for an example, we know they have 2 very good wide receivers in Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. The line definitely will probably need some assistance here. So right away, my first thought is, well, Ed Ingram probably needs to be replaced. He's only a 73. I don't know if he's going to be that good. Maybe Alexander Madison is somebody that we want to look to replace, or Cam Akers. But the reason you don't want to just make that rash decision right away is because what if I start playing some games and Alexander Madison just goes off, and I start building him up and I'm like, you know what? I want to keep Madison. I don't want to get rid of him. Same for Ed Ingram, and this is why preseason can be important, because you get a chance to play with these guys and get a feel for what they're going to be able to do for you. And then you're not going to get all the answers from playing preseason, but it can help you in deciding, like, you know what? Ed Ingram played rather well, so I don't know if guard is really something I need to search for right now in the draft. And you can go on to a different position, like the defensive line. And this one is in such a bad shape that you're going to draft at least one player down here to try and get that to be better, because you can't always rely on free agency. Those are some of the reasons why I feel preseason is very important, because you never know who is going to play well, who is going to play bad, and that just gives you a little bit of a taste to see if somebody on your team that you thought you needed to replace is not somebody you need to, or somebody that you thought was solid across the board actually underperforms in your system and you decide that you want to move on to them. Here's a little free nugget of information. If you haven't already seen this scenario, the rookie one, or mentor rookie, if you choose immediate impact, it just gives them some upgrades or whatever. But if you do long-term development, watch what happens. So I clicked on long-term development. As you guys know, I simulated to next week, and now I have a response to that. And watch what we're going to get here for the receiver, Jordan Addison. That was the mentored rookie in this role. Then passed, and he automatically just got a dev upgrade. He was star, he went up to superstar. So sometimes think of the long term, because that's a free upgrade right there for a player that I didn't think would be able to earn that till at least the end of the season. So anyway, back to the drafting. So I'm just going to move through preseason. I've already told you guys why I think that you should stick to your preseason and actually, pay attention to it and pay attention to your players to see if there's some guys on your team that surprise you or disappoint you before getting to week 1. And I'll show you why. Here we are in week 1, and you're going to see that now you get to choose your draft class, and you also have to hire and assign scouts. If you want to have an imported draft class, this is how you do it. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to choose draft class, and then you can either keep the auto-generated rookies, which just means the randomized draft pool that Madden gives you every season. You can download from the Madden Share community files, or if you made your own draft or already have one saved to your profile, you can upload it here in your franchise. I always go with the auto-generated because I just feel like it's just more spontaneous. I don't really know anything about these players, whereas if I bring in a current 2024 draft class, I already know who the good players should be and who I at least expect people would have made good in their made up draft file. So I just go with the auto-generated, keep things interesting for myself. And then once you're done with that, you're going to want to do the hire and assign scouts. Now, this is important. This is the only week that you can hire and assign scouts. You cannot do it in week 2. And in week 3, you have to assign those scouts to the areas that they are going to be scouting for the entire season with the positions that they are an expert in. So you definitely want to make sure in week 1, you take a breather, you go in here and you decide what you're going to do with your scouts. So we're going to go in here. I'm going to just click on scouts. And this is going to take you to the page where all of your scouts are. Now, if you want to keep your scouts, you can. That's great. But always look over and decide, okay, am I going to need a cornerback that bad this year that I want to know what all the corners are going to look like? Is tight end a need? And obviously we don't need two different scouts for tight ends. And with the Vikings and TJ Hawkinson, you don't need a tight end at all. So usually what I do is I just fire everybody. And now everybody's fired. Once you fire them all, your screen's gonna be blank like this. But if you hit L2 or whatever the prompt is in this area for your console, you just drop down to free agent scouts. It's gonna bring you to this page where it shows you all of the available scouts for you to sign. All you have to do is hit triangle, hit confirm, and then they will be your scout. You see that there is a tier. You are allowed to have 1 3-tier, 1 2-tier scout, and 3 1-tier scouts. Before we go through the motions, there is a lot of information that I want to throw at you guys so that you understand where this completion percentage is going to come from. Right now you see that it is at 0%. Now the goal is to get as many players as you deem necessary for your potential drafting to 100%. You are only going to be able to get at least, if it's a positional group in a region, 1 positional group to 100%, and potentially an extra 6 players to 100% if you do it right. Now I'm going to show you guys how to do all of that and what my testing has found out. But first, I just need to break down everything. So there are 2 types of scouts: a national scout, which handles the entire map, the entire country. And then there are regional scouts, which is your west, central, northeast, and southeast regions. Now these have different ways that they scout when it comes to the points that they unlock. You actually get more for your regional scouts than you do for your national scout. And I think this is because it is more focused in the region, so that it says, if you're really only focusing on a handful of players out of this position group, we're going to give you a little bit more to work with when it comes to how much you unlock. This is where things become interesting in how you decide to put your scouts. And this is also going to be played into with the tiers, the different tiers, and how you can work it to get 100% on one position and maybe 75% on a couple of other positions to get a broader understanding of the draft class that's in front of you. So before we get into the national and regional numbers, I'm going to show you the tier breakdown as to what every tier gets you for a percentage. Now remember, you have a base of 50%. So all players will get to 50% even if you don't do anything. Now, if you also use a tier 3 scout, you will have a 25% boost for having a tier 3 scout on a position. Tier 2 receives 15%, and your tier 1 receives a 5% boost. There is another caveat to this in regards to the difference between national and regional. When you're doing regional scouting, you will actually get a 2 times bonus on this. So if you are doing a tier 3 scout in a region, say southeast on corners, not only are you going to get a 50% base, you're also going to be able to unlock them 100% of the way, because you're going to get a 50% boost because it's a tier 3. A tier 2 will get you 30%, and a tier 1 will get you 10%. The numbers you see here on the screen is the percentage you will get for a national scout without the 2-time bonus. Now, of course, this lingo that I'm using might not be exactly why Madden has it set up this way. All I know is I've done the testing, and this is the outcome. The most simple way I can put it: regional scouts get a 2-time bonus on the actual boost that each tier gives you. So a tier 3 at 25 will get you 50 with a regional, a tier 2 at 15% will get you 30, and a tier 1 at 5% will get you 10% when you're using a regional scout. Now that you guys have an understanding of the tiers, let's look at the actual scouts themselves. So you're going to notice that every scout has a position expertise 1 and a position expertise 2. Now this is also something that determines between national and regional and how much more you can get done on certain position groups. You can use either one of these as well. It does not matter if you decide that you want to use, like if you're looking for a defensive end and you're going to hire Calvin Heath here, and you want Calvin Heath to look at all the defensive ends and outside linebackers in a certain area. Let's say the West. Okay, we're looking at defensive ends here. And you see that, okay, well, he's got this and he's got these 2 guys. Okay, so not a lot of people. And then you also have outside linebackers. And you're like, you know what? There's a couple of extra guys at outside linebacker. I would rather him look at the outside linebackers here. You can choose to have him scout the outside linebackers, and it will not give you any less than if they were to, you know, scout their expertise 1. This is interchangeable when it comes to you know, how much points you unlock for this being a focus point. Now, the other group, the extra group, is going to have a little bit extra of stuff that they unlock for having a second expertise. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but I just wanted to show you that there are two positions. So this one is going to have the main focus, and then this one will get a little bit of an extra jump for being a second expertise in that same region from your scout. And before we get into more of the details, we got to talk about the national scouting. So this national scouting is a little bit different, okay? Only the primary expertise can earn more than 50%. So when I just talked about, they really seem to nuke the national scouting a little bit. So if I'm going to do a defensive end scout that also has an outside linebacker secondary expertise, if I do regional, the second expertise that I'm not focusing will still get a boost. However, the national scout, regardless of what tier it is, only the position that they scout will get the actual boost. There is nothing given to the secondary expertise. Regardless of what tier, what region, it doesn't matter. If it's a national scout, they only have the one position that you set them to scout that's going to have any type of a boost above what you already get. Also, a national scout cannot reach 100% because they do not get that 2 times boost on the payouts like we talked about before with the tiers. Regardless if you have a tier 3, if you have a tier 2, tier 1, you will never get to 100% on a position group using a national scout, no matter what, without using focus scouting or private workouts or doubling up on certain areas, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The next portion, and this is sort of the breakdown as to what you can expect of the national scout. So as I mentioned, you're going to get 50% for the base unlock of every player. Every player, no matter if you scout him or not, is going to get 50% unlocked by the end of the season. You're going to get a 20% boost for having a national scout on them automatically. So if it's a cornerback or a defensive end group that you decide to have your national scout on, it's going to have a 20% extra boost just for you scouting them. So that's a total of 70. And then national scouting has the 25% for a tier 3, which is going to bring you a 95% boost. They have a 15% boost for tier 2, which will bring you to 85. And they have a 5% boost for tier 1, which of course will bring you to 75. So those are the numbers that you will get with a national scout just by scouting them with nothing else. This right here at the bottom is your sort of equation to figure it out. Your base, always 50, plus the national boost, which is always 20, and plus the tier boost for depending on the tier of scout you have, will give you the final number that you will have for a player that you decide to scout at the national level. And now it is on to the regional scouting. So your regional scouting, again, it gets the 2 times bonus, where the national had the 25 for tier 3, 15 for tier 2, 5 for tier 1. Your regional is going to have a 2-time boost for the primary expertise. So whichever position you choose for them to scout in week 3 is going to get 2 times 25 for 50, 2 times 15 for 30, or 2 times 5 for 10 on top of the 50% base that every player will get. And this is also the only way to reach 100% scouted on a position by just using the scout itself and the base setup. And the way to do that is by using a tier 3 scout in a regional positioning group instead of on the national level. So again, for regional now, you're going to get that 50% base. You would get 15%. Okay, that's supposed to say regional there, not national. So my apologies, I forgot to change that out. But 15% for a regional boost. So it's 5% less than your national boost. But you'll get a 50% increase for a tier 3 boost. 30% for tier 2. 10% for tier 1, which gives you your base of 50 plus the 15. So now you're already at 65. And then you're either going to add 50, 30, or 10, depending on the scout tier that you use in that area. So if you do a tier 3 in a region like West, Central, Northeast, or Southeast, instead of on your national scout, you can unlock that grouping together at 100% without anything else, which also frees up the focus scouting and private workouts that we'll discuss in a little bit. Now that I've explained the differences between the tiers, national and regional scouting, we have to put together what scouts we're going to use for this season. I have a lot more explaining to do, but I have to get some of this stuff unlocked before I can show you guys exactly how this stuff works. So we're going to go through and I'm just going to show you the process that I use. So I just chose this wide receiver tier 1 because I think there's a lot of them, and that could be a position that we want to look at to add with Jefferson and for Addison. And sometimes I like to go and look at a position that is an abundance of the draft class, so I have an understanding of where the nucleus of the player pool is. I would rather take a good receiver that I don't need and find a stud than reach at a position that I do need because I feel like I have to, and then, you know, miss out on a potentially good player. So wide receiver is what we're going to do. We're going to set that to the national scout at a tier 1. I want to show you guys a little trick here to try to maximize other positioning. Now, once we have our national figured out, we have to go through the regions individually and figure out where the best spot is to scout for these to get a good reading, and also keep in mind of the needs that we have. So for the West is usually going to be pretty light. You're not going to find an abundance of talent in the West. You can still find good players. As you can see, there's 3 of the top 5 are in this area, but you're still never going to be, you're not going to come across a bunch of prospects in the West or the Central for that matter. So you can see there's 1 quarterback in the West. There's 2 running backs. And when I say 1 or 2, like, I'm talking about draftable players. I'm not looking at the UDFAs. That's for later. I want to just look at the guys who are considered draftable that I know I have to scout if I want to try and get them between rounds 1 and 7. Just to put that out there for you guys. Wide receivers don't have that many, which is good because we're going to do them at national anyway. Nothing for tight end. 2 tackles. 1 guard. Nothing. Oh my gosh. There is really not much available in this area. 3 players there. 1 there. 1 there. 3 there. Okay. And not even much there. What about safeties? At least give me some safeties, right? Oh, wow. So because this is not going to unlock a lot of players, right, for this region, I would not put a tier 2 or tier 3 here. Because why would I waste that extra scouting on 2 or 3 players max? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a few key players from this area that I really want to know a little bit more about, and then that will dictate where I go with this for going forward. Now, we know that corners are somewhere that we want to try to get a little bit of info on, but there's only 3 here. Outside linebacker could be a potential. There's 4 guys here. I think I'm going to do with quarterbacks just to get a little bit of information on Lucas Allen here. I'm essentially throwing the West away because there's just nothing in this area for this draft class. So if I'm going to do that, I might as well at least get a quarterback situation figured out. Kirk Cousins is getting older. Maybe Lucas Allen is a guy I want to look at, and who knows where we end up in the draft. So I think we're going to go quarterback for this, just to sort of speed things up a little bit. If this was me seriously scouting this, I probably wouldn't have gone with some of the positions that I'm going with, but I'm just trying to give you guys some insight while also making sure that this video isn't 3.5 hours long. So bear with me, okay? Here is one. We can do QB and wide receiver at a tier 1, which means we'll get a little bit of a boost for wide receivers, which will just add to the national setup that we have going right now for the wide receivers. So we're going to go Felix Perez here, and then I'll set him to West right away so that I don't forget that I have him set there. And then we're going to go to Central, and then we're going to view the regional prospects again, and we're going to go through the same step all the way through until we get through to the Southeast. Here, no quarterbacks that are worth it, no running backs that are worth it, no fullbacks, few receivers, but I don't really see us needing to double down on that. Not much for tight ends. 2 round 1 guys at tackle. Offensive line is always hard to find because they're spread out so thin and there's not that many of them. First thing I see here is that defensive ends could be something we look at in the Central area. Oh, definitely. You have 3 day 3 guys and 3 round 1 guys in the right end position, and then you have 2 more first rounders, a second and third rounder, and a day 3 guy here. So 8 total players. No, 10. So never mind. 10 defensive ends in Central, which is actually a pretty good number for what the Central usually will give you. We're going to keep looking just to make sure that there's nobody else that I really want to look at. So now what I like to do, that I know that defensive ends are the strength of this region. I want to see if there's more defensive ends in different areas. If there's not, then I know this would be a good place to put my tier 3 or tier 2, depending on which position I deem as the most important. So Central had 6 right ends and 4 left ends for a total of 10. The Northeast has 6 left ends and 3 right ends for a total of 9. So pretty close there. And then looking at the Southeast, there's 2 guys in the later parts at right end, and there's only 2 at the left end spot. So this is telling me we're going to want to go elsewhere for the defensive ends. So I'm going to actually place a tier 3 scout here at the defensive end position in hopes of capturing as much as I can about these 10 guys. And now looking at the defensive ends, I have to decide what I also want for a secondary expertise, because remember, without it being a national scout, we're going to get a little extra boost to both positions that they are an expert in, not just the one that I decide to set them to. And if I want to do tier 3, it looks like I have the option of outside linebackers, defensive tackles, and then that's about it. But if we look over here, we might be able to find a different setup as well. So like for instance, at this side, we have defensive end, but it's for interior offensive linemen. And that's about it. So I think what's going to be the best is, because we are running a 3-4, we should do the tier 3 with D tackle, because that'll also give us a few extra guys to look at for all 3 areas of our defensive line. So we're going to go with Travis Bailey. And this is something also I'm going to explain later once we get to the end of the season. I can show you guys more of the numbers and the grades with it. So just keep that in mind. I know that was a question that was asked of me in one video, and I do plan on addressing that later on. So now we've decided that Central is going to be our hub for our 3-tier scout, because we need defensive ends, and defensive tackles aren't a bad consolation prize here. And now we need to go to the Northeast and find out what's the strength there. Nothing for quarterbacks, nothing for running backs, nothing for fullbacks. Some wide receivers. So this could be a good indicator of maybe a secondary position to just add to that extra little bit of a boost that we're getting from the national scout. A few tight ends, a couple of tackles. We don't really need tackles though. We do know that there are a few defensive ends in the area. We could even do a twofer on defensive ends, but I don't know if I would really want to go that route. Nothing for outside linebackers, nothing for middle. No. But there are a really good chunk of corners. There is 9 total. So that is actually where I think we're going to go. We're going to go corners here. And I think, depending on what the Southeast has, let's check the Southeast too right away. Southeast has a quarterback, a few running backs. Oh wow, a lot of receivers. So this is going to be an area where I know for a fact I'm going to get some type of receivers on a secondary at least. There are a few tackles. We don't need tackles. We're looking for secondary and maybe linebacker help at this point. And look at that. Outside linebackers, well, left outside linebackers that is, are in the Southeast. 6 of them. And a lot of the day 3 guys for corners. There's 10 corners all later parts of the draft. 4 free safeties and 3 strong safeties. All right. I think what I want to do here, and some of this is also playing around with what you can get, right? Like maybe I do want to do a tier 3 at the tier 2 at this spot for corners for the Northeast. But what can I find in a tier 2 corner to go along with it? And look at that. It comes out perfectly for a wide receiver. So I already know that I'm going to go this tier 2 for the corners in the Northeast, and I'm going to get an extra little bit of a boost for wide receivers on top of it. So there we go. And now it's just figuring out where we want to land on Southeast. And since safety is a position of need, and there is actually a good chunk of them in this area, I think we are going to go ahead with free safeties and strong safeties and try and get a secondary at corner to just get a little extra more. And if you get down to the safeties here, now we just need to find one that has corner as one of the secondaries, which I know there is one, and there it is. Curtis Caldwell. And he's going Southeast. So now we have our our scout set. We've done our research on the class. We've made the choice as to where we're going to get the most bang for our buck from, but also address a couple of areas of need with the defensive ends, the corners, and the safeties. So I like this right now. And, you know, this is part of the process. You're not always going to be able to scout the areas based off of position of need, because you can't guarantee the draft you're getting is going to have what you're looking for. But what this tells me is now I'll know a good chunk about defensive ends in that area in the central. I'll have a good grasp on the wide receivers. I'll get some additional information about safeties and some extra stuff about corners in different areas. So now we can use that to our advantage to sort of and build this into our free agency look as well. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go and skip to week 3 and show you the setup process. All right, so once you get to week 3, whether this is by simming or if you just play through, just remember you have to stop in week 3, because this is where you're going to get your regional focus scouting. This is where you set all 4 regions of the scouts. If you do not do this, I'm going to show you how it's going to set. So if I chose not to, look at what the current position is. It's going to show right under the scouting focus, above where that yellow bar is for view regional prospects. Every single one of them is at quarterback. You don't want that, okay? So you're going to go through West. Remember, we did quarterbacks in the West because we wanted to find out a little bit about that one quarterback in the off chance that we have a good pick and we want to draft a quarterback. So we're just going to go down to set focus scouting, click on quarterback. You'll get this screen, just hit OK. Move on to the next one, defensive ends, set focus, go to defensive ends. There we go. And you just keep doing this until you are completely finished setting up all 4. Now the national scout does not get set in week 3. He will get set in week 8. So hold off on that, but also keep that in mind that you can't skip past week 8 unless you don't want your national scout to look at the position you want them to look at. Now that we're in this area, you can see underneath the expertise on their scout card here, the 25% efficiency boost when scouting defensive ends or D-tackle positions. What that means is the boost that I referred to before for the tiers is based off them being an expert in that field. If you do not choose a scout that has an expertise in the position that you are scouting, they're not going to unlock as much percentage, and it's going to end up hurting how much you can unlock. So that's why week 1 is so important, because even if you decide to stop in week 3 and set your areas for the scouts that you want, if you don't have the correct scouts, you're not going to get as much unlocked, and you're going to go into the draft not knowing as much as you could. And if you ever need some more reminders as to what the important parts are, if you're on this screen here, at the bottom, you'll see it says key info. Click on that and it's going to show you every area where you need to be ready to do something, okay? So you have week 1, hire and assign scouts. We just finished that. Week 3, select position focus for area scouts. That's your regional scouts. We just did that as well. Week 8 is when we choose the national, and then we get into more of the super focus and the private workouts later on. It also shows you underneath what percentages you need to unlock certain things for players. 50% gets you that letter range in their attributes area, which again, I'll show you later. 70% gives you their archetype. If you do not get to 70%, you won't know what kind of archetype player they are. You'll have to guess. And then 100%, of course, you're going to get all the letter grades down to a single letter, and you're going to know exactly what their talent is compared to what their projection in the draft is. And now we're in week 8, and once here, now you'll be able to set a focus for your national. We've already decided on wide receiver, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to set that, and now we are good to go. So you are getting a little bit more understanding of what these positions are going to do for you. We're not going to look in depth at what I've already unlocked until we get to week 11 and we can start doing the private workouts, and that is the next area that we are going to talk about. All right, so now that we are in week 11, this is where the next important part of the drafting process is. So you're going to have prospect spotlight and scouting focus player. Before we get into it, I'm going to show you a couple of more slides so that you guys understand what happens here. So for extra scouting, there's 2 things to know. 1, choosing focus players in week 11 will grant you 30% more on the selected players. And then later on in the offseason, you're going to have private workouts where you can select another 3 players, and that is going to unlock 40%. So essentially, if you play this right, depending on what position you look at, you could unlock another 6 players to up to 100% at any position if you've at least done some type of work on them already. Because for the private workouts, they just need to be at 60%, and you need to have them at 70% for the focus players in week 11. The first thing that we're going to do is the prospect spotlight, because that can give you a player that maybe your GM wants you to look at. Usually it's not a great player to look at, but I always click on it because you never know. We may want to take a deeper look at free safety Raleek Humphrey. He's been standing out from other prospects in terms of his football IQ. And that's pretty much the gist of it. That's all you do. It just tells you to look at this guy. I also mentioned the news tab. So if you go over to the news here, you're going to see all these tweets on the right side. And if you scroll down, you might be able to find one. There we go. So at the very bottom, under Jonathan Coachman, he has a tweet about a prospect. Interest in Kansas State defensive end Sammy Washington seems to be increasing at a rapid pace. He is the NFL's worst kept secret right now. So that's telling you that this defensive end Sammy Washington apparently is doing some good things and maybe might be a consideration for your draft board. And you'll see these different types of stories all season long. So that's why it's important to stick to the news channel every week. And what I do is I'll write them down. I'll put it in a notepad document or something, so that way I can go back and look at them at the end of the season or during the draft to be like, oh yeah, hey, this guy won this award or this guy did this. Maybe he'll have a hidden development. Because if they have a story about them and it's a good story, it just ups their chances of having a hidden development when you draft them. So once you click here, you're going to click on choose focus players. And now in the top left, you'll see choose players for super focus scouting, 0 of 3 players chosen. You can choose 3 now, and you can choose 3 at the end of the season. So you have to decide, do you want to fully focus on one particular player that's maybe at a 50% like Joe Childress here? Because if we did him this time and the private workout, we would get enough to unlock his full potential by the end of the season. Or do you want to go with a guy like Roy Young, where you already have 75% of him unlocked? If you chose him right now, you would already know what his talent is before you even get to the offseason. And now you can start to see the scouting picture come into shape. We have a 75% completion on quarterback Lucas Allen. We didn't do anything at running back, so there's, not much here to look at. Wide receivers, we have some at 75, we have some at 90, some at 80, and this is because we did the national focus, which is where you're seeing the 75 from, and then the wide receivers also had, I believe, 1 or 2 areas where they were either the main focus or they were the secondary focus. So they had a little bit of extra boost to what we unlocked. So now this whole wide receiver class is going to be at the very least 75% completed. And honestly, if we really wanted to dive into receivers, we would be able to unlock 6 of these guys to know their full potential. And remember, I told you, if you did a tier 3 scout in a region, you would get to 100%, and that's exactly what we did here. All the defensive ends that we went ahead and looked at, all are fully unlocked. And we now know that Jacoby Campbell is actually a top 5 talent, but we don't need to take him in the top 5. We also know Byron Lucas is not exactly what he's projected to be, and same with Trey Keenan. We know that these 2 guys should not be taken in their projected spot. But we also had a story on Sammy Washington. So what that tells me is he might come in a little bit less than what you anticipate, 72, 73 overall, but he might have a better chance of having star, superstar, or even X-Factor development straight out of the draft. Remember how we did the secondary for D tackles on our tier 3? Well, that gave them an additional 25%. So now they're at 75% just for a few of them. But it gives us a clearer picture on some of these guys that we can now use later on to make a determination. This is where things start to really unfold, and you can really see that you're getting a good chunk of players in a lot of areas. We also have 75% on some safeties. On both free safety and strong safety, because they group them together. And here is that guy that they wanted us to look at, Raleek Humphrey. And if you don't want to choose a guy, because if you click X, it's choosing them, you can just hit square and it'll show you their card again. And this will just tell you a little bit more about them. And now you're starting to see this picture really come into play. And now we can talk about the actual cards themselves. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pick our 6 players. So I'm going to do the 3 here. We're going to sim to the end of the season. We're going to pick our next 3. And then I'm going to show you guys the full breakdown of what I was able to accomplish with this draft. And then we're going to go over a couple of extra details to know. So I think we're going to go with Lucas Allen. We want to know if this guy is a good quarterback or not. I also don't think I'm going to be drafting a receiver in the first round because that's either going to go to the quarterback or a defensive end, I think. But I do want to know more about some of these players later on. So I'm looking around, I'm looking for players that might jump off the screen at me a little bit. Something else to remember, if you click on a player here, like let's say we choose Lucas Allen, and then I go and look at Adam Whitaker's scouting card, when you come back out of here, it is going to uncheck the player you already checked. So you'll have to go back and reselect them. So just something to keep in mind when you're doing this, because I've had that before where I thought I had all three and then I went to, finish scouting and it didn't let me do it. And I actually missed doing exactly what I wanted to do, which was rather frustrating, but it's a live and learn situation. I'm going to do Dre Greer, who looks rather interesting. And then I think we're going to do a safety. Actually, screw it. We'll do Raleek Humphrey. We'll see if this guy had any idea what he was talking about. So there's our three players. So we have Lucas Allen, Dre Greer, and Raleek Humphrey is what we're going to do. And how this works is next week, Lucas Allen will unlock. The week after that, Dre Greer will unlock. And the week after that, Raleek Humphrey will unlock. So it goes week to week to week, depending on in which order you place them for a selection. Now we are at the end of the offseason. So two other things to keep in mind that weren't necessarily important for me to show you guys. In free agency 1 and free agency 2 in the offseason, so just a couple of weeks ago, you unlock the scouting combine numbers and the pro day numbers. And what that does is it just gives you their numbers that they had for their physicals, speed, acceleration, that kind of stuff. And I'll show you how it breaks it down here. First, we have to choose our private workouts. Now, these guys will unlock all together the very next week in the draft week. Okay, so we're in here now, and we are deciding on what we are going to do for our private workouts. You also get a chance to see well, obviously, if you were doing this in your franchise, you'd see this much earlier. But here for this video, we're now getting to see the results of our focus scouting earlier in the week 11. So we see that Lucas Allen is a round 1 talent, so he is not a top 5 projected quarterback. Normally, this would say, hey, I'm not taking him top 5. But a lot of the times, quarterbacks generally will come in at a lower overall than some of the other positions because they are such an important position. And usually they'll have some type of a dev trait, star, superstar, X factor. So I'm not too upset about him being top 5 and having round 1 talent. It would be worse if it was like round 2 to 3 or round 3 to 4 talent, because then he's just not a good quarterback. But being round 1 talent, that means he could be top 6, like the 6th best player, all the way back to like the 19th best player. And that for a quarterback is still a good range to be in when it comes to deciding the future of your franchise. We also know Dre Greer is not somebody we should draft. He was not a good position. And honestly, if this was me again, seriously doing this, I would have put more time and effort into choosing who, but I just wanted to show you guys examples. So don't judge me for looking at Dre Greer. It was just an example to show you guys. And then let's also look at Raleek Humphrey here. And it's showing that he's a day 3 talent. So now we know that he should not be taken in rounds 2 to 3. He should be taken no earlier than rounds 4. So now we have the ability to choose somebody for a 40% hike in their percentage. That could be another quarterback. It could be a running back, maybe. Maybe we want to learn a little bit about a guy who jumps off the page to us. I want to know more about Marcus Walton. So we're going to make Marcus Walton one of them. I want to get him to 90%. I want to know more about him. I want to go with Marcus McGee. And maybe I want to come back and I want to look at James Carey. Those are my 3. Marcus Walton, the running back, Marcus McGee at corner, and James Carey at D tackle. Then once you sim to the week of the draft, you'll have one more opportunity to look at the players, create or edit your favorites list, and then of course start the draft. Once you start the draft, you can no longer edit your favorites list, so keep that in mind. So Marcus Walton, we ended up finding out that he is pretty decent. He has elite strength, which is good to know. He's A, trucking, B, stiff arm, B, carrying, B, break tackle, and B, ball carrier vision. Awareness is A or a B. So this could be an actually pretty good pick towards the end of the 2nd round, maybe. Now that we're at the end of the season, I'm going to show you guys the player card and how I break it down. I know we could have done this a lot earlier, but I wanted to show you guys all of the steps. And when we're looking at this information, I feel it's important for us to have the information unlocked for you to see it, because you won't see it all right away. So now that we're at the end of the season, We'll get to see the full picture of it. You'll know where to look and what to look for, and it's just going to come at you in a little bit of a different way when you're doing it on your own. So the first page here is a scouting report. Player notes. This is where it tells you some about their traits. So when you go to edit player, you go to traits, you know, penalty, fights for yards, covers ball, all this stuff. That is what these are. So let's look at Marcus Walton. Covets ball security over everything else when carrying. That's going to tell you that he probably covers the ball all the time. Needs to work on simple concentration drops. So he could have drops open passes trait, which is still something that happens behind the scenes. I don't know if you guys know that there's like 2 traits that are behind the scenes that you can't change in a player at all, but they are still somewhere coded in there. So he will drop easy passes sometimes. Fights for every single inch as a runner. So now you know he will probably have fights for yards for a trait. Avoids big hits following catches. He's good at possession catches. He can possession catch. So with that one, you know that with those 3 catching traits at the bottom, he's going to have possession catch as a trait. And then excels at creating yards after the catch. Now you know he also is going to have the yards after catch trait. So he knows what to do with the ball once he catches it, and he can keep moving. And that's the different for all positions. Like, let's look at Lucas Allen's player notes. Beautiful spiral on all his passes. Tight spiral is still something that's behind the scenes, and Lucas Allen has tight spiral. Stands tall in the pocket and always aware of pressure. This guy is probably going to have ideal pressure. He actually might be a really good pick. Does well to avoid sacks by throwing the ball away, so he's going to have throw ball away trait. Vast majority of his success comes while in the pocket, so you know he's a pocket quarterback. He's not going to be a scrambler. Fast flick of the wrist throwing motion. So he's not going to have a whole body type of throwing motion, and he can flick the wrist and it just goes flying. So he's going to have a pretty decent throwing motion as well. That is how you sort of can tell what a player is going to have without the game telling you. You have to decipher the notes that you see. Let's see if I can find a different one here that'll show us a scrambler. There's got to be one. Okay, Darren Doris here. Now looking at Darren Doris, beautiful spiral on all his passes, same thing. Gets rid of the ball at the first sign of pressure, so that might mean that he's trigger happy or paranoid. Does well to avoid sacks by throwing the ball away, has throw ball away. Loves to run and play outside of structure. This means he's going to have scrambling QB trait, which is good, which means he can run the ball and he will decide to run the ball. Elongated motion with a quick release. So he's not have the best motion for his throw release, but at least it's a quick release, right? Is this going to look a little weird and longer than normal when he's winding up to throw it? Let's look at a linebacker as well, just so we can get an understanding of what we're all seeing on these. Scouting report, physical player who delivers bone-crushing hits. He might have big hitter trait. Savvy defender with the ball in the air. So he might have aggressive play ball. Has a motor that runs through the whistle. He's going to have high motor trait. Often looks to rip the ball from the runners. He's going to have strip ball, which is a big trait to have. Lacks discipline resulting in avoidable penalties. So he's going to be undisciplined with his penalties. See how it's it sounds like just a random sentence, but when you get to know these things and pair them together, you can essentially tell what all of these traits a player is going to have before you even consider drafting them. Now let's go back to Marcus Walton here, and I want to show you the rest of the stuff that we're looking at. We're going to go over the physicals. And the ratings on the far left, these will at one point be a range. So where it says his acceleration is decent, it'll probably say decent to good or decent to solid or whatever before we get the combine and pro day results. And once you get all of them unlocked, it'll drop it down to this final one here. We know he's got decent acceleration. We know he has decent speed, marginal change of direction, but he has elite strength. And then if you look at these combine and pro day numbers, you can get an idea of where he's at. He runs a 4.5 40. That's good for 19th, but he improved it at his pro day, 4.46 for 13th. Bench press, he's first, 32 reps. He came in second in his pro day. You know, he's third and fifth in his broad jumping for both days. So this tells you he's going to be a power back. Now let's go to the skills and see if that translates. Well, we know it does because we already saw these before. He has A, trucking, B, stiff arm. He's not going to be the quickest and shiftiest running back, but he's more of a power back. And now let's look at Dante Combs, who is an elusive back. He has great speed, elite acceleration. Looking at his combine and pro day, He's first in both 3-cone and 20-yard on both combines and pro days. So this guy is going to be fast and very quick. Looking at his skills, he's got B's in ball carrier vision, break tackle, carrying, awareness, spin move we know is a B. This right here is the worst a card will ever look for you, 50% scouted. And you can still find quality information here. Just because I didn't scout Dante Combs for a private workout, or I didn't focus on running backs, some positions you can still find what you need. Dante Combs is good at carrying, good at break tackles, good at ball carrier vision, good at spin move, and we know he's going to be really fast and really quick. There's nothing else you need to know. He's going to be a quality player. I don't need to be at 100% scouted to know that. And there are some positions that are like that. So now that we've seen all of the stuff that we need to look at, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through all of the positions and I'm going to tell you what it is that you need to look for in each position, just to try to help you, give you a little bit of an extra boost to your knowledge when it comes to this. For quarterbacks, I don't think you need to really focus too much on quarterbacks. I do like finding one or two of them and figuring out exactly what they are just for the talent aspect of it. But let's look at Joe Childress here. We know he's a field general quarterback. And if we look at his physicals, we're not expecting him to be very fast. So this isn't very, stuff that we need to know. We know he's got good throw power. Looking at his skills, he has A, awareness. That's pretty good. A, short accuracy. B, deep accuracy. We know his medium accuracy, which is right next to short accuracy, is going to be no less than a C. And it could be an A. His play action is a B. His break sack is a C. So even though we don't know much about him, we do know that he has some decent qualities to him. And then looking at Lucas Allen here, this is the one we have 100% scouting on. Let's go over to his skills. And it looks like he's got some good stuff. A, awareness. A, break sack. A, medium accuracy. B's in both short and deep. B, play action. B, under pressure. C, throw on the run. So when it comes to quarterbacks, if I'm scouting them, if I'm looking at a strong arm, I don't care about anything except the throw power at the bottom. I don't care what his speed is or his excel. He's never going to use it because he's a pocket quarterback. But we know he's got elite throw power. And if they have elite throw power, they're probably going to have anything from a 95 up to a 99 for throw power. There's like rates for this. There's different like areas where you can expect to find them on the spectrum. Elite is going to be mid to high 90s. And we know he's going to have A, awareness. We know he has A, medium accuracy. And this goes back to how you're playing. If you're playing like I do, when it's CPU versus CPU, you need to make sure his awareness is high. Awareness is one of the most important statistics for a quarterback. The next one I would say is probably throw under pressure. As crazy as that sounds, we know he's got to be there, so that's not bad. And then you want to look at accuracies. Once the accuracies are done, what is his play action and throw on the run? So that's my tier. Awareness is far and away the best. Throw under pressure is the second tier. Accuracies is third tier. And then throw on the run, play action, break sack, that stuff is on fourth tier for me. And the reason for that is that awareness is hard to raise. Throw under pressure is hard to raise. Accuracies are not. Neither is the other stuff, depending on how you upgrade. So that's what I look for in quarterbacks. Running backs are very easy to scout. Like Dante Combs here, we just looked at his physicals, right? We know he's got all this good stuff. We also know some of his ratings, and I don't need to see them all. For halfbacks, it's super easy. That's why I didn't even scout them. Because if you look at Dante Combs, we already know he's the fastest and quickest running back in the class. He's first in 40, 3-cone, and 20-yard. Looking at his skills, he's got B's in carrying, break tackle, ball carrier vision, and spin move. So that's about, let's say 60% of the ratings that you need to worry about in a running back. We already know he has a B in all of them. His awareness could be bad. It could also be a B. It's really, some positions you don't even need to scout, it seems. Others you have to scout. So far, halfbacks, not one that I really feel the need to scout. Now, if I'm trying to compare between a couple of running backs, like maybe I'm trying to decide between Dante Combs and Junior Leverett, I might need to throw some scouting at them so I can try and decipher which one is better. But I can still tell, looking at Junior Leverett here, he's a day 3 guy, so you have to take that into consideration. He's not the fastest. He's still mildly quick, but going to his skills, he's got C's for all the stuff. Carrying, ball carrier, juke, spin. Chances are if he's got C's in that many categories, some of these others are going to be close to that too, like break tackle or awareness. Awareness might even be worse than a C. So I already know Leverett is probably not going to be that good of a running back. And also when you're looking at these cards, looking at those 4 ratings on the far right are a good indicator for some of them. Other positions, not so much, but for things like running back and quarterback and receiver, sometimes it'll be like, you know what? I don't even see 4 worthy, overalls to look at. So I'm not even going to look at the players. So like, for instance, Parker Reese, he's got 3 A's and a B to D. That should tell you that he's going to be a decent prospect. And if we look at his physicals, he's not very good at the 40 yards or nothing, but he's a power back, so he's not supposed to be. But his skills, he has A's in carrying, break tackle, ball carrier vision, trucking, and stiff arm. This is a steal. I'm telling you now. You know what? Maybe we'll even try to draft him in this little mock, this run through, and we'll see what he looks like. But I'm telling you, Parker Reese is going to be a good player. Fullbacks, I do not really have anything that I look at particularly for them because I just don't draft them very often unless there's somebody that's draftable. But I'm always looking at physicals. If their physicals are top of the charts for their positioning, I'll probably take a flyer on them, but they have to have at least good carrying. Right, so he has C to F. I don't consider that good, so I would just move on. But fullbacks are not something that I very much spend time scouting on. Wide receivers can be a little tricky sometimes. So when you're looking at a receiver, you have to look at their physicals, obviously. You want them to have decent speed, unless they're taller. Like the way I see it is if they are 6'2" and above, they can get away with having solid to good speed. And if they're like 6'6", they need to at least have good to great speed. And same with like below that. They need to have like good, great, maybe even elite speed for me to draft them if they're below 6 foot, because I don't want a bunch of slow dudes trying to run around and they're not even jumping over dudes, right? They're not even jumping up and getting the jump balls. They're just too short and too slow. Not going to do it. So with Roy Young here being a top 5 pick and he has only solid speed and he's at 5'11", the rest of his skills better be damn good. And it looks like they are. So he's got A in medium route and spectacular catch, B in catching, C in catch and traffic and release, B deep route, A break tackle. So this is going to be more of a Swiss Army knife type of player. He's going to have other qualities to him like carrying, ball carrier vision, probably kick return. I didn't see where is that on the list here? Oh, there it is. A to B in kick return. So even though his speed isn't the best, he's probably going to be a little bit quicker. He'll probably be very polished in his route running, and he's going to have the ability to play almost like a running back. Tight ends, I just look at their receiving stats. That's just how I roll. So I'm looking here. I see Clay Barton is a possession, and he's got A's and B's on the board. I'm going to look here. He's 6'5", 250. His physicals, not the best. And I know it's like, well, look, he's got 6th and 7th and 12th. It's not like he's bad. You have to remember, tight ends aren't that deep of a class to where 6th is good. You know, you need top 3 in like 40-yard dash and those things for it to make sense for me. And then there's a lot of stuff to look at on tight ends because they're not only receivers, but they're also run blockers and pass blockers. I'm only looking essentially at receiving stats because I want a tight end that can catch the ball. This isn't 2007 anymore. We don't need tight ends that don't know how to catch and are just 6 linemen. If you want a guy who's just a 6 lineman, that is awesome. Just make sure that you're looking for guys with blocking as their archetype. And there really isn't that many of them anymore. But here's one right here. Hayden Thurston is blocking. So that's what you're going to look for. But tight ends, what tells me if they're going to be good or not, and this is not just about an overall position in real life, but how Madden sees it. You want to look for guys who are gifted, like Akil Fowler here. He's 1st in 40, 1st in 3-cone and 20-yard. He's got elites down the board on his ratings. So his skills, even though I don't know a lot about it, he's got A catching, B deep route, A awareness. This guy is a good tight end. I'm taking him off of those. If they have good awareness, they have good catching, and at least one of their route runnings is decent, I would say C and above for tight ends. They're going to be a quality player, especially lining up with the fact that their physicals are really high. Linemen are another position where you can probably get away with not scouting them. Unless, again, you're trying to decide between 1 or 2 certain players. because linemen will tell you in their physicals if they're one of the better prospects or not. And it's been that way for years. So let's look at, we'll go Derek Philbin here. Top tackle on the board. Looking at his physicals, the most important thing is you want to make sure that your linemen in general, no matter the position, have at least 30 reps on the bench press. The more the better, but if it's below 30, don't even waste your time. And that's just the truth. But you can see by his ratings, great, 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 elite, great, solid strength. So he's gonna be more of a finesse type of guy, a pass protector. Looking at his skills, look at that. A in awareness and pass block finesse. Lead block is a B, pass block power is a C. You don't know much else about him, but what I'm telling you right now is he's probably gonna be more of a prototypical pass protector at left tackle, which isn't bad. Run block finesse is A to C, so he's got good spreads as well. Run block, finesse, and impact block, all A to C range. Then looking at the next guy, Eddie Cruz. He actually has pretty good ratings as well. Elite excel, great agility, great change of direction, great jumping, great speed, and great strength. He's got third, he has 4th in 40, 3rd in bench press, 3rd in vertical jump, 5th in broad, 8th in 3-cone, and 9th in 20-yard. Looking at his skills, A lead block, B pass block finesse, D injury, A to C awareness, A to C impact blocking, A to C run block finesse. So this guy, I think, would probably be better suited for potentially a guard role because of that lead blocking. I just don't see, with his pass block finesse being a B, how you could decide he's a top 20 pick if he's not even solidified at the left tackle position. And one thing to look for in Madden is centers. For some reason, Madden has an obsession with giving you a weirdly good player at center or guard every draft. I don't know why, but they just do. There's usually one guy. If you can find a guy that has at least 3 first-round places in their physicals, draft him, because he's going to be good. That's essentially how I draft linemen. If they have good strength and the rest of their physicals look good, I will take them, because that's just an indicator that they are going to be a higher overall within that position group. All right, so I just found Oscar Blake. I'm going to tell you guys right now, I'm pretty sure Oscar Blake is going to be the best offensive tackle in this draft. He's got 1st in 40-yard dash, 2nd in bench press, 2nd in vertical, 1st in broad, 4th in 3-cone, 3rd in 20-yard shuttle. And his skills say that he should have decent ratings. Lead block is A, impact is A, pass block power is C, but his pass block finesse is going to be where I think he stands, because he is an agile archetype. So I'm looking at what archetype they are, and then of that archetype, are those ratings higher, right? And if those ratings are higher, the physicals are good, and the strength is good. Remember, over 30 reps in bench press, they're going to be a quality lineman. So my call right now is Oscar Blake is going to be the top or 2nd best at the tackle position out of the whole draft. And now we get to the defense, and this is where a lot of questions were asked. And I want to explain why Madden messes this up and how you can read through all of the stuff to make a good decision. So when you're talking about a left end or a right end, or just defensive ends in general, we'll say, there are 2 types of defensive ends. There is a 4-3 and a 3-4 defensive end. I know a lot of you are going to know the difference between these two, but I just want to put it out there for those of you who do not know what the difference between is. So we're going to start with a 3-4. That is sort of been the most popular defense as of the last like 5-6 years. I'm still a big fan of the 4-3, but a 3-4 defensive front looks like this. So in the yellow squares there, you're going to have 3 down linemen, and then you'll have 4 linebackers. So you have your nose tackle in the middle, which is essentially your defensive tackle. And then you'll have 2 defensive ends on either side. You'll have 2 inside linebackers, and you'll have 2 outside linebackers. Now, when you run a 3-4, the nose tackle or defensive tackle needs to be a bigger guy. I'm talking like 310 to like 350. You want a bigger body guy that can plug up the gaps. Your defensive ends should be between like 270 to 300. And usually you want like power rushers or run stoppers for those positions. Now, the outside linebackers in this situation, and in this particular defense, actually spend most of their time blitzing the quarterback or rushing the quarterback. So you're actually going to look for guys who are built like defensive ends, 6'4", 230 to 250, or 235 to like 260 range. They're at least 6'2 to 6'5". Those guys are your defensive ends that can play outside linebacker in a 3-4. And now here is that same defensive front, but in a 4-3. So in a 4-3, you now have 2 defensive tackles as opposed to 1, 2 defensive ends, and you have 3 linebackers. So essentially, when you go from a 3-4 to a 4-3, you are just swapping around your front 7. But in a 4-3, you can afford to have a bigger D tackle, but also one that's maybe like, 290 to 310, more of maybe a power rusher type role, along with the bigger guy that plugs up the run lanes. And then your defensive ends are the guys that played outside linebacker in the 3-4. So those guys that I mentioned that are 6'3", 6'5", 240 to 260 that were standing up in a 3-4 are now down on the line at defensive end. And you add another inside linebacker to play along with the other 2 linebackers. So you now have just 3 off-ball linebackers. And what that means is off-ball is, instead of rushing the passer, they're usually playing the run game and they're dropping back into zone coverage or even sometimes man coverage. Whereas in a 3-4, those outside linebackers that are standing up are rushing the passer. They are 90% of the time doing just that or helping in the run game, and very few times are they dropping off into coverage. And the reason I bring this up is because Madden does not decipher between the two. A lot of the times, a stand-up outside linebacker in a 3-4 is just a 4-3 defensive end. They're interchangeable. Okay, so this is a bad example because none of the players are here because I didn't do any re-signings for this example of a franchise file, but we run a 3-4 in Minnesota, right? So Patrick Jones here, looking at his player card, he is a power rusher. You see how there's 4 different types of linebackers for archetypes: power rusher, speed rusher, run stopper, pass coverage. If you're running a 4-3, your outside linebacker should be a run stopper or pass coverage linebacker in your system. If you run a 3-4, they should be a power rusher or speed rusher. So with Patrick Jones being 6'4", 264 pounds, he fits with our 3-4 defense at outside linebacker. But if I was to move to a 4-3 defense, Patrick Jones would actually get changed to a defensive end and put down on the line, because now that is where all the edge rushing is coming from, is from the line. It's not coming from the linebackers. That would also mean bigger guys down here, like your defensive ends, actually become defensive tackles. So let's take a look here at Dean Lowry. So Dean Lowry is 6'6", 296 pounds. Is he big enough to be a nose tackle in a 3-4? No, he's not. But he's good enough to be a run stopper and power rusher from the defensive end position in a 3-4. However, if I switch to a 4-3 with this defense, Lowry is way too big and not the right archetype to play defensive end. So I would move him into the inside at D tackle, and he would play what they call a 3 technique, where he's more of a in-between pass rushing and run stopping defensive tackle. That would leave a bigger guy like Harrison Phillips, who's 307 and 3 inches shorter than him, better at run stopping and plugging up the holes, to be the nose tackle in a 3-4, but also play one of the defensive tackle positions in a 4-3. And I tell you all of that because if you look at defensive ends in your scouting here, you're going to have a guy like Tavares Adams, who's a speed rusher. He's 6'2", 266. So based off of the information I just told you, he's less than 270. He's not very big. He's a speed rusher. If he's playing at defensive end in your defense, he needs to be in a 4-3. If you run a 3-4 and you draft Tavares Adams, you should really stand him up at outside linebacker, because that is where your edge rushers are coming from. And then if you go down the list here, look at Byron Lucas. He's a power rusher, but he's 6'4", 292 pounds. And if you're running a 4-3, he is way too big to be playing defensive end in that system. But if you're running a 3-4, that is the perfect size to play a power rusher / run stopper role, while your outside linebackers are the actual speed rushers. And the same goes for outside linebackers. If you're running a 3-4, you want a power rusher or speed rusher to be your linebacker. But if you are running a 4-3, you're going to be looking for guys like Levi Shields and Silas McFarland, who are run stoppers and pass coverage guys, because they are more built to withstand that. So for defensive ends, you need to keep that in mind. But that also unlocks some extra scouting for you, because now when I look at defensive ends, okay, I'm not only looking at defensive ends, I'm also looking at outside linebackers for my system, because Tavares Adams, Randy Rush, Jacoby Campbell, Trey Keenan, all of those guys fit better as an outside linebacker. But I didn't have to scout the outside linebackers to find that out. Now I just know that these are some of the guys that I could look at to fill an outside linebacker role. The other awesome piece to this is that D tackle, you can essentially find your entire defensive line now, because you're going to have bigger guys and you're going to have smaller guys like James Carey here. This is one of the guys that we did the private workout on. If you look, he is 6'3", 297, which is a little bit undersized for a nose tackle in a 3-4, but for a defensive end, he's like the perfect size, and he's a power rusher. So you could move him to one of your defensive end positions in a 3-4 defense, and he immediately becomes a pretty decent defensive end draft prospect that you just had. And looking at his stuff, A, power move, A, play rec, B, awareness, A, hit power, C, finesse moves. He is built to be more of an in-between guy at defensive end. But then you can go down the list here, and you can look at a guy like Leslie Gaines. Leslie Gaines is 6'4", 350 pounds. This man is a nose tackle no matter what system he's in. But that tells you that that's where he needs to play. You couldn't put him at defensive end. He shouldn't be playing there. He's not going to be very good at rushing the passer. You can see his finesse and power move both a C, but his block shedding is a B. Block shedding is what you need to look for run stopping. And his play recognition is an A. So this front seven stuff is really where you have to study and you have to understand these things, because if I go to draft defensive ends, I'm not just drafting defensive ends, I'm also drafting outside linebackers in my situation. And if I'm drafting defensive tackles, I'm also potentially drafting defensive ends, depending on which type of player that I decide to go with. Now, a guy like Matthew Pollard could sort of play both. He's 6'5", 309, and he is more of a run stopper. So when you look at his skills, he does have the ability to rush the passer very well, actually, B's in both departments. So even though he's almost 310, I still might consider playing him at a defensive end position just because he has the ability to rush the passer. So there's a lot of versatility when it comes to the defensive line and the front seven as a whole. And you have to know what you're looking for. And the reason you'll hear me complain about Madden not drafting well or making good decisions is because we'll have teams that run a 4-3 drafting Brandon Aldridge here, who is very clearly an edge rusher and not an off-ball linebacker who can play in zone coverage, to play in a linebacker role that requires him to play in zone coverage. You don't want to do that. This guy's going to come in with like 50, maybe 60 something at zone coverage. And if you put him back there, he's going to be slower than the other off-ball linebackers, and he's not going to be able to keep up with the guys he's trying to cover. But if you look down here at a guy like Brian Henson, he's 6'1", 230 pounds. So he's smaller. He's going to be a little bit more agile. You can tell by his speed and his acceleration that he's a little bit quicker than some of those other guys. And now looking here, his power moves is an F. His finesse moves is B to D. His pursuit, though, is a B. His tackling is a B. His zone is A to C. So that tells you right there, the zone coverage is the indicator. If they have good zone at outside linebacker and they're not good at rushing the passer, they are an off-ball linebacker. And an off-ball linebacker can play either outside or inside in a 4-3 defense. But if you're in a 3-4, those guys play inside linebacker. So when you go to scout and draft front seven, you can look at multiple positions for every single area. Because if I'm running a 3-4 and I look at outside linebackers, I'm not just looking at outside linebackers. I'm looking at them and middle linebackers. So that covers all linebacker territory. And if I'm looking at the defensive line, defensive ends can give me both outside linebackers and defensive ends. And then defensive tackles can give me both defensive tackles and defensive ends. So it just depends on the type of system you run. And now if you're sitting there like, dude, you just rattled off a whole crap ton of information and I might have to replay this like 4 times to understand it fully, don't worry, because the schemes will tell you everything. Look at your scheme if you're having any doubts and follow that. All of the archetypes will tell you what they are good at, and that'll tell you if they fit your system or not. I just know most of what the schemes are going to tell you right away, so I don't really need to look at that stuff, but it's all there for you. So that is the biggest takeaway when it comes to drafting your front seven, is knowing what kind of defense you run and what kind of players you need at those positions, because Madden does not know how to change that, right? I wish there was a way where you could have a filter for 3-4 or 4-3, and it would just show you what fits at that position. It would filter the speed rushers and filter the power rushers into a position, instead of it being just defensive ends, outside linebackers, defensive tackles, because it's not as black and white. It's more fluid when it comes to this stuff, and Madden just hasn't caught up to that yet. That's why we, as the players of the game, need to pay attention to what we're drafting, because we could put ourselves in a bad spot, right? If I draft Sammy Washington here, a power rusher, if I'm playing a 4-3, he might fit in one of the spots, but usually you need a speed rusher for that. But if I'm playing a 3-4, now he's got to stand up. And what if I didn't need an outside linebacker? You know what I mean? So there's variables to this, is what I'm trying to say. And I know that was a lot of talking, and I know that was a lot of rambling, but this is really what comes down to drafting, is knowing what you're looking at. And this is one of the toughest areas to decipher if you're not 100% comfortable with the game or the positioning, or if you're newer to the game as of football in general. And that sort of explains what I'm looking for in the front seven. Defensive ends, I want to see if they can rush the passer and if they have good play recognition. Defensive tackles, I'm looking if they can first stop the run, and then if they have power moves. Outside linebackers, depending on what I'm looking for, if I'm in a 3-4, outside backers, I'm looking for power rushing and speed rushing. Do they have both of those? Do they have strength? Do they have pursuit? And then also at outside linebacker, I could be looking for potential inside linebackers. And those are the guys that are a little bit smaller, 6'1", 250, 6'2", 226, 6'1", 225, the pass coverage guys. For those guys, you need to look for pursuit, zone coverage, man coverage, tackling, play recognition, because those guys can move inside and play a middle linebacker. And then, of course, the same goes for middle linebacker. The same thing that I'm looking for out of the pass coverage guys at outside linebacker. I would say I have gotten tricked more times by linebackers than I have almost any other position when it comes to not scouting them fully. So if you really need linebackers, I would highly recommend you make sure that you put a good effort into finding as much out as you can before making a decision. Because you can find a guy like, look at Corey Foster here. He's rounds 3 to 4, so you already know you have a potential, good or bad player. His physicals aren't the best. He's sort of in between. And then his skills, he does have some good stuff. A, block shedding, A, hit power, A, play recognition. What are you going to get elsewhere? Is this guy a top 5 pick, or should he have been undrafted? So linebackers especially, and then also considering that there's so many different positions all sort of wrapped together, linebackers, defensive ends and stuff, you want to make sure that you're putting the time in with those guys if you're really trying to focus on them, because you can get not only defensive tackles or defensive ends, you can also find linebackers in those positions. And then vice versa. You can also find defensive ends at outside linebacker, and you can find outside linebackers at inside linebacker. And it's very intertwined. So make sure that if you're looking hard at linebackers or defensive linemen, make sure you put that effort in to unlock as much as you can, so that way you can make a good decision for yourself. And we're getting down towards the end of this. We're looking at corners. Corners is very simple for me. Man and zone coverage, and what are their physicals? If I'm looking at their physicals, this guy's 6 foot. He's slow. He's got solid speed, but he's got elite acceleration, elite jumping. But he's at least a bigger type of corner. He's 6 foot. He's got B's in zone and man coverage. He's got A's in hit power. So he's going to be a decent prospect. He's going to be a slower prospect, but he's going to be a good player. Isaiah Norris, who's 6'3", 196. I like that build. He's got better speed than the other guy. Good speed, great acceleration, and he also has B's in his coverage. So in my opinion, I would take Isaiah Norris over him. He's a little bit quicker, he's taller, but he does have F injury. Now, this is where it comes into play. What I've learned, I went through and did some testing, and I found that injuries across the board for the draft if they have an F, usually don't get below like a 77, 76 range. 78 seemed to be the most consistent if they had an F rating, like the lowest tier. They can go up as high as, you know, mid 90s, but if you see an F, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have a 40 rating. Usually if they're going to have a 40 something rating at injury, it's because they have an F rating and they also had a story telling about how bad of an injury history they have. That's the indicator there. And once you get down here in this range, like you're not in the first round anymore, what I'm looking for is if their man in zone is at least a C. And that's what I use. Now you can do it how you want. I'm just giving you guys my opinions here. If they have anything below C's at both man and zone, I'm not touching them. Like Clarence Stewart here, he's got C zone but D man. So this guy better be able to hit hard and tackle well, because then I could potentially use him at safety. But it looks like he's got C tackle and his hit power is C to D, so he's not going to fit there. I'm not drafting him. And that will sometimes take people away, and sometimes you have to take flyers, but that's just what I stick to. That's what I like to do. If they have C's at both, I'll consider drafting them. But if they don't, I move on. And free safeties and strong safety. This is really also about what kind of player you're looking for. Strong safeties are typically going to be more of guys who play in the box. They're not going to be as fast. They're not going to be good as coverage, but they're going to hit hard and they're going to tackle well. Your free safeties are going to be quicker. They're going to cover better, but they're going to lack in some tackling and they might lack in hit power. So know what you're looking for. At free safety, I'm trying to find guys who are at least 6 foot because they have to play downfield. They have to stop the guys going deep. I think that they need to be taller than 5'9" to get that done. That's just my opinion. So Jalen Keenan would probably be the guy I look at first. And when I go to look at him, he's 6'1", 207. He's got top 5 in 40 at least, well, from the combine. But he's got good speed. His play recognition is a C. So for rounds 1 to 2, I'm not a fan of that. Safeties need to have play rec. That and awareness is important to them, almost more so than zone coverage and tackling. So I would focus on, for safeties, they need to be good at awareness and play rec. If you can find guys that are good at those things, I would definitely take a flyer on them. So not a very good safety class from what I'm seeing here. I'm not seeing anybody that really jumps off the page as like, holy crap, this guy is going to be good. Looking at strong safeties, you can find both guys at both positions. Like Chris Buckner here might be better suited to play free safety than he is at strong safety. So look at this more of as a concerted effort. Look at this more as a group effort instead of individual positions, because you can always change their position after you draft them if they fit better in your system elsewhere. So just keep that in mind. Like Michael Phillips here, he's definitely a strong safety. 6'1", 220 pounds. He's full run support. And he's also got some pretty good physicals. Good speed, great acceleration. A pursuit, A hit power, B play rec, B awareness. The only area that he's hurting in is man and zone. So I would take him in a heartbeat for a strong safety consideration. And then what I would do is I would probably work on his zone coverage to get that up and his hybrid archetype to get that up. And then you could have a really good all-around safety, maybe just on a little bit of a slower side. He probably won't be the fastest in the class, but you know, 88, 89 speed, something along those lines. And then we're on to the kickers and punters. Honestly, I've never once drafted either one of these guys. And if you need to look at them for something, they should really just have A's in accuracy and kick power. There's nothing else to know. What is their kick accuracy and what is their kick power? Their kick power is also going to be in the ratings, just like throw power is. It's for some reason in the middle though, so it's right above speed there. You'll see kick power is decent, so he's not even good at that. So that is what you do for those, and that is at the end of my rambling of the different positions. And you know, sorry for those who maybe are already understanding of some of this stuff, but I wanted to make sure I get down to the very basics for some of those guys that are still in the very basic stages of their understanding of this process. Now that we have everything all done, I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to get to the draft. Once we get to the end of the season, mock draft 5 is going to come down, and this is going to really tell you almost exactly how the first round is going to go. For the most part, this will go by just the same way that it says it will on this list. Sometimes there will be deviations in the plan, but for the most part, usually they stick to the script. Now, once we get down to our area though, we're back at the 19th pick. there could be changes. I mean, there could be a team that makes a trade and it could change exactly where they anticipate taking a player, you know, or if somebody others, like if a team trades up and throws everybody's, you know, mojo off, then it might end up changing what the outcome of the draft is. But for the most part, usually you can get a pretty good idea of who's going to be available on this draft board. Like for instance, it says that we're going to take Aldridge, so he's apparently supposed to be available. Same with Clifford, Shepard, Carey, Henson, Buckner, Campbell, McGee, all of these players. Now, will all of them be available? We don't know, but at least we have a good idea of who should be available once we get on the board. And right away, you see that now that we got down here, somebody actually ended up coming up to take that Jacoby Campbell guy. So there is a way for it to be a deviation, but just for the most part, it will stay to where it's supposed to be. And you see that Isaiah Norris, who was actually, you know, supposed to go earlier, is still available. So quite a few guys actually got taken when they weren't supposed to. I like seeing that though. I wonder if they made an update. It used to not be this crazy. I'm liking this. But I think what we're gonna do here is we are gonna stay put. Marcus McGee is considered a better talent than what his projection is. I don't see any reason to not take him. And this is also something that'll happen too. Like if this was me and I really wanted defensive tackles or defensive ends, I would have traded up in this draft because there was a lot of them going early on, but I didn't really want to for the sake of the video. So, you know, keep in mind, you know, the positions that you want can disappear very quickly. Those defensive ends that should have been there are all gone because everybody saw the value in them and they started trading for them. So what I like to do is I will look at the mock drafts and I will try to get up ahead of where I think that the player that I want is going to go. And then I will sort of just try to trade up if need be, or I move on to the next pick. And in this case, we're going to have to move on to the next position. And I think Marcus McGee is going to be the guy we want to pick up. We know enough about him to have him 100% unlocked. He's a round one talent. Let's just go ahead and bring him in. And there we go, 92 speed, 94 excel, and he's a hidden dev. And now we are back here with the second pick, and let's see what is available to us now. Another tip, once you get to the second round and you start seeing all of these round one guys still available, do not believe that that means that other teams are idiots. What that means is that those teams know that they're not very good and they passed on them. Essentially is what that means. So I will usually go right to the spot where I'm supposed to be picking from. Unless I know, if I have them unlocked and I know that they're actually good, I'll take them. But if I don't know that they're good and all these other teams have been passing them up, I will go straight to the area. Like for this case, it's rounds 2 to 3. And that is where I'm going to start looking at my list to see who I want to take. I'm not going to take anybody else before that because I know the CPU knows that those players aren't very good. Most of the players that I was going to pick have already been taken already. So what I'm going to do is, because I told you guys I felt that Parker Reese was going to be one of the best running backs, I'm actually going to take him ahead of where he needs to be taken because I don't have a third round pick and he's a day 3 projection. I'm wondering if he might end up getting snatched up when the running back run starts to go. So I'm going to just go ahead and take him right now. Once you get into like the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round, I am now looking for players that just look like they're athletes. Look like they have like 1 or 2 really, really good ratings, and I'm just taking flyers on them because you never know what you can find in these later picks. And that includes even, you know, undrafted guys. If you find a guy that's undrafted, don't be afraid to take him if you believe in their rating spread, because sometimes you'd be surprised the kind of players you can find down there. One player I found was Jalen Holmes, a strong safety, and the reason I'm going to take him is because he's got the best 40-yard dash, the best bench press, the best vertical jump, second best in broad jump, and he is here on day 3. Now he's a little bit smaller at strong safety, but he could be a project guy for later. So I'm gonna go ahead and take him. All right, so after the McGee pick, we just went ahead and simmed through the rest of it. I did take Parker Reese though. I made sure to take him in the second round because I really wanted to see what he looked like. But the rest was just sort of fill-in players, and I just simmed through it all just to show you guys the after effects of the draft. So Marcus McGee was the guy we went with in the first round. He ended up being a 76 overall, 6'1", 202, good speed, good acceleration, very balanced for man and zone. I like to see that. Parker Reese ended up being 73 overall, which is not a bad spot to be at for a running back. And you can see he's pretty balanced. Everything on here is pretty much balanced. I like to see it. It's Lucas Allen. He wasn't a 79 overall or anything crazy like that, but he was a 76 overall. He was normal development. That is interesting to see. Normal development quarterbacks at the top of the draft, not very often, but still a good pick. Whereas some of those other guys that we were looking at. And Dante Combs ended up being the best player. That running back that I was telling you guys about had the best ratings, 94 speed and 95 acceleration. That does not surprise me. He had good juke move, good spin move. Very good player. And then Roy Young, the guy that I was talking about that was a little bit on the slow side, but was going to be good like everywhere else. And he was just that. 89 speed. So for 5'11", not the fastest receiver. 93 excel, 83 catching, 84 short, 80 medium, 87 spectacular catch, 95 agility, 86 ball carrier vision, juking and spinning, good kick return. So overall, a very, Swiss Army knife type of player. You can play him out of the backfield, play him in the slot. And here's one of the tight ends that we looked at, Akil Fowler. So we looked at him and he had some really good ratings, and it sort of transferred. 87 speed, 89 acceleration for a tight end, 82 catching. Route running definitely needs work, but catching traffic and spectacular catch is good. And that right there is really the whole process, guys. It's just doing your homework, looking at all the positions available, looking at what you're going to want to target. All right, and that is going to pretty much end everything. Before we do leave, I just wanted to show you some examples again. So when you are scouting and you're looking at these players, you have an understanding of how you can get certain numbers, okay? So let's just go over some examples here. So let's just say we're at a regional scout with an expertise in quarterback and wide receiver. It's a tier 3 scout, okay? It's regional though, not national. So we're gonna get 50% from the base. We're gonna get 15% for having the regional boost. Remember, it's 20 for national, 15 for regional. And then we're gonna get an extra 50 for the tier 3 doubled. Yes, I know that's more than 100, guys, okay? It's 115. I just put it down to 100% to make it match up with the video. Don't make it sound weird. Don't make it seem like I don't know math, okay? And then on the wide receivers, you're still gonna get that 50% base, and then you still get the 25% from the scout. You just don't get that double boost that you do with the regional. So that would put your wide receivers, the second expertise, at 75%. And now if we go to a national scout with the same setup, QB and wide receiver at tier 3, you're gonna get 50 for the base, 20 for national boost, 25 for the tier 3, but not the 2-turn. Remember, that's only for regionals, and that is why you end up with only 95%. But you get no upgrade for wide receiver, because remember again, national scout does not get any extra boost on their secondary expertise. And that was the last bit of information, just sort of a recap again for you guys. I know this video is a little bit long. I hope you guys can use this as a guide if you ever get stuck or if you're ever not sure where to look. And I hope this helped you understand things a little bit better in the draft world when it comes to Madden franchise. If you guys found this helpful, leaving a like would be really appreciated. Hitting that subscribe button if you want to see more of this information or some franchise videos that I'm going to do in the future. And also turn on that bell notification so you know when these things come out. And I will see you guys next time.